Hi, this is Muho, and this is a final announcement for tomorrow's Zazen. I've been sitting Zazen on Sunday mornings in the Osaka Castle Park for the last 12 months, but now because of the Corona crisis, we will do it online. And I will stream it live on YouTube, so whoever has time tomorrow, Sunday, April 12th, from 6:40 to 7:40 is invited to join. This time is of course Japanese time. In most areas in the West it will be Saturday. In Europe it will be around midnight. In America it's in the early afternoon, I think. If you're interested, please check the time if you want to sit live with me. I will also later upload it, so if you can't sit at that time slot, you can sit later if you want. Before tomorrow's Zen, well, probably I will be live at around, say, 6:20 or so. I will ring the bell at 6:40 and then we will sit for 1 hour. I would, probably there's not much time for explanations, and I could imagine that most of the participants are in Japanese, but also some participants from the rest of the world, but I won't have the time to give a thorough introduction in both Japanese and English. Usually when we sit together in the park, we just say Ohayo gozaimasu, which means good morning, and then we sit silently together for 1 hour. So tomorrow also, I don't think I will talk a lot before we actually start the sitting. So I want, for those of you who are maybe not so familiar with Zazen, I want to make some explanations now. About the posture first. Right now I'm sitting in a posture that's called Burmese sitting posture. Sometimes in the West or in Japan it's called Agura. This is also one way you can sit during Zazen. If you are very flexible, you can sit in the full lotus posture as well. For this, traditionally first you raise the right foot and put it on the left thigh, and then you raise the left foot and put it on the right thigh. And Dogen says that you put the thumbs so that they are in line with the edge of the thigh. So that's about how I have them now. Often people sit rather like this, which isn't a big problem, except that you put more pressure on your ankles. So if it's possible for you, I would recommend that you actually sit like this, because it makes it easier for your ankles. There's less pressure on the ankles rather than sitting like this. If you can't sit like this, that's not a problem. You can sit in the so-called half lotus posture, which would be this, or the other way around. The left foot on top of the right thigh. In the Fukan Zazen, Dogen Zenji only mentions this version of the half lotus, but I think it's no problem if you switch around and have the right foot on top. One thing that's important in the Zen tradition, or I think in most Buddhist traditions, when you meditate, you use a cushion or something that can replace this cushion. For example, a blanket that you fold together. You want that cushion because without the cushion, your posture tends to be like this. With the cushion, your posture changes to this, and when you actually sit, you will feel the difference. You will So see, it makes a big difference if you sit like this for some time or like this. It's harder to concentrate and stay alert and awake in this posture. While sitting like this with your pelvis bone bent a little bit forward, and that again helps to bring the chin backwards. This makes more of a difference than you would expect if you never sat in this posture. So try to find something that helps you to bring the pelvis bone forward. As I said, you can use anything. It doesn't have to be this kind of round cushion. You can use any kind of replacement. One thing you should aim at is bringing the knees down on the floor. Right now I'm sitting on this tatami mat, but you can also have a yoga mat if you want to, or sit on a blanket, whatever. Because your knees should touch the floor, it's probably advisable that it's kind of soft, that you don't want to sit on a stone floor or a wooden floor. Probably also it's not so good. Try to have a reasonably soft surface. And if your knees are up in the air, then your body isn't really balanced. You don't really have a good stable posture. So try to bring the knees onto the floor, and the cushion helps with that. The higher the cushion, the easier it is to have the knees on the floor. Also, if you can sit in full lotus, so if you can sit in this posture, at least in my case, the cushion doesn't have to be so high. I can still sit reasonably well, even with a quite low cushion. But if you sit in half lotus, because one of your feet will be tucked under, in this case you probably want to sit a little bit higher. In my case, I would want to have at least this height, so that my foot that's now tucked under doesn't go numb. If both half lotus and full lotus, and maybe even the Burmese posture, are difficult for you, because for some Westerners, even when they sit in this posture, their knees are still up high. If all of these postures are difficult for you, you can also do a kneeling posture like this, and you use the cushion to put it under your buttocks. You can also sit like this. Well, all of these postures involve a certain amount of pain. So, well, try to find one that allows you to sit for an hour without moving, if possible. Well, as I won't see you tomorrow, of course, you're free to move around as much as you want. I won't be yelling, I won't be hitting you with these sticks here. I mean, we don't do that in Antaiji either, but I mean, in traditional Zen monasteries, you move around and you get hit. Won't happen tomorrow. But I recommend that you try to find a posture that allows you to sit still for an hour, which usually also involves just accepting a certain amount of discomfort that you will experience after, say, 30-40 minutes. Because our bodies and also our minds are not used to keep still for an hour. So sometimes already after 10 or 15 minutes, you will experience a lot of psychological, do you say, resistance. Your mind starts to scream, I need to get out of here. And often you connect that to some feeling of physical discomfort. I can't possibly bear up with that pain. How can I possibly sit like this for a whole hour? But even when it feels like dying, you usually don't die. In Antaiji, during the last, I don't know, 18 years since I've been the abbot, I've seen hundreds of people coming, and quite also a good amount of people for whom Zazen was the first time with Zazen, who came to Antaiji, and then they have to sit, for example, the 5-day sessions where they sit from morning to night 15 hours a day. And even newcomers, to my surprise, usually they can do it. Often for them it's easier than for somebody who's been sitting for years in the West, but for say 25 minutes. And if you have kind of in your head this idea that Zen needs to be over in 25 minutes, then of course it's hell if you have to sit for an hour. But if you come there with an open mind, you have no conditioning, and your first experience is with 1 hour of Zazen, then that's what is normal for you. Even if you're a beginner, you can deal with that. So anyway, don't force yourself to sit in full lotus or half lotus if you can't do it. You can sit in the Burmese posture, you can sit in the kneeling posture as I just did. But try to have your pelvis bent a little bit forward. Don't do it too much. You don't have to kind of press it forward. Sawaki Roshi somewhere says that your anus should be pointing towards the sun. Which is wrong. Your anus should not be pointing towards the sun when you sit in Zazen, but your pelvis should be a little bit bent forward. And then your spine is stretching. You allow your spine to stretch in a natural way. And your chin is probably a little bit tucked backwards than your shoulders. You don't have to force them backwards, but they should be in line with your ears. So if your ears are moving a little bit backwards, your shoulders can also be backwards. Next, about the hands, Dogen says put the right hand down on your feet. Of course, that's only the case if you're sitting in half or full lotus. If your feet are here, then it's probably good to have some kind of support here. For example, you could use something like this yoga mat, or you could use a towel that you fold. If you don't sit in full lotus or here, the cushion, you could place your hands here like this. If you're sitting in full or half lotus, then probably the hands will rest on the heels, or at least on one heel. What you could do is put something on top of the other heel, so that makes it easier to balance the hands. Traditionally, it's said that you should put the right hand first, and then the left hand is resting on the right hand. What I actually have been doing the last couple of years is that depending on how I fold my feet, I do the hands the other way around. So right now there's this space here. My left heel is higher than the right heel. So what I do is that I put the left hand first, and then I put the right hand on top of that. You don't have to do it like this. Traditionally in Soto we do it the other way around, but you can also maybe experiment with that if you want to. And if I put the feet the other way around, which I do sometimes, then I will put the hands the other way around as well. about the hands, there's some kind of, how do you say, details which you might want, but you don't have to pay attention to. One thing is the exact posture of the thumbs. So if you are kind of tense and you put a lot of energy and you're fighting, kind of, if you're fighting during Zen, your thumbs tend to become like this, pointing upwards. While if you're drowsy and you're starting to sleep, your thumbs will first sink and then they're gonna be all over the place like this when you're sleeping. Ideally, I would say the thumbs are like this, they're just straight. In some traditions they tell you to kind of open the mudra as wide as possible, but I think this would be okay. I mean, it's up to you to kind of experiment with this and try to find out what works for you. Another question is, where should the thumbs be, except for that, well, they should be straight, but right now my thumbs are touching my navel. And when I was practicing in the Rinzai monastery for about a year, actually, well, that's where we're told to put them. At that time we were sitting like this for some reason. In many monasteries, Rinzai monasteries, you sit like this, but where I practiced we were sitting like this, and the thumbs always had to touch the belly, otherwise you got whacked with a stick. In Antaji, I would sometimes sit like this, so that my thumbs were actually touching my belly, especially when I felt tired. It helps you stay alert, because when you start to get drowsy, your thumbs will move away from the navel. Your hands will move forward. And as soon as you realize that, you can put them back. So it's kind of, you got a checkpoint here. Am I still awake? Is my mind still here? But if on the other hand you feel tense and you want to relax, you can also put your hand further down, like here. There's less strength in this, for example, or you can even put them down here. There's less strength here. Of course, well, if you put them too far down, then your shoulders will tend to move forward, so you don't want your hands here, but you can have them somewhere here, and that might help you to calm down, relax. But if you feel drowsy like this, you can also put them here. So that depends on you. You might want to experiment there. About the elbows, it's sometimes said that you should imagine that you had, how are they called, these African birds? Ostriches, big birds that lay big eggs. So I think a little bit smaller than a rugby ball. But well, imagine you had a small rugby ball, or this ostrich egg here between your trunk and your elbow, and you're holding the ostrich egg between your arm and your trunk. So if you have the arms too tight, then you would break that egg, while if you hold them like this, the egg will fall. So you want to gently balance two eggs, left and right, between your arms and your trunk. I said that you should allow your spine to stretch naturally. If you consciously stretch it, there's a tendency to also raise the shoulders. That shouldn't happen. So your shoulders should be relaxed, while you allow your spine and the back of your neck to stretch, and your chin moves at that point a little bit backwards, especially at least when you compare it to maybe your normal. If you work at the computer normally, You might have a posture like this, and in Zazen you move the pelvis forward, your back stretches, the shoulders will be a little bit further backwards, and also your chin is moving backwards, and the tip of your skull might be 1 centimeters, 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters higher up than when you're in this posture. About the eyes, in Zen we say they should be half open. In many meditation practices you close them. You don't have to be attached to this idea that they should be exactly half open. If you feel tired, you can also normally keep them open. If you have them open, probably it's easier to stay awake. But if you feel agitated or nervous and you want to calm down, you can also close them. But the general idea is that in Zen is not about introspection. It's not that you try to see into yourself, but basically all you see in this moment, that's yourself. So there's no reason to close the eyes so that you can better find your true self, which is somewhere hiding inside. The true self is neither inside or outside. The true self is everything that's happening in this moment. So if you have your eyes open and you see dimly the world outside, what you see there is also your true self. But most of the day we're so absorbed by our, visual perception. Like when we use computer, when we use the smartphone, what we use most are our eyes, this visual input we get. So I think that's one of the reasons why in Zen we don't shut the visual input out completely, but we reduce it to a certain amount, so that we maybe pay more attention to the sounds that we would usually not hear, the sounds of wind and rain and birds, or maybe the neighbors, whatever. And also the physical perceptions, from what you feel at the bottom of your feet to the tip of the skull. All of this also, most of the day we don't pay much attention to, and in Zazen that's also part of the scenery that you have there. So the eyes, you can experiment with that, but the general idea is they are half open and you have them 45 degrees pointed downwards. You can also experiment with either focusing on one point or seeing the whole panorama. If you focus on one point, it helps you to concentrate the mind, and it might keep you from drifting away, and it helps you to avoid having your consciousness scattered all over the place. But also it can create a very narrow and artificial state of mind. I sometimes start with focusing, but then eventually I try to open up and see the whole panorama. And that's not only for the visual perception, but in Zazen I'm aiming at having my eyes open for the whole panorama, but also to take in all the sounds and to open up to the whole panorama of this physical perceptions. So be open and alert to all 5 senses. And then in Buddhism, actually we don't talk about 5 senses in Buddhism, but about the 6 roots. The 6 roots are eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and then consciousness. So consciousness is also considered, or is put in one line in the same category as the five senses. And things you see, sounds you hear are put in the same category as thoughts that come up. Often people think that during Zazen you're not supposed to think. You're supposed to have an open mind, an empty mind. In Japanese you would say mushin. Mu means nothing. Shin is the mind. A mind that contains nothing. The mind of nothingness. So you sit there, you expect to experience an empty mind, or maybe you think it's your task to empty your mind actively, and you will experience it's not that easy. Actually, many people in the beginning are kind of surprised that they're always thinking. One thought pops up after the other. Thoughts, emotions, things that happened yesterday, things that happened last year, things that happened when you were still 3 years old, 4 years old, your first childhood memories come back. Plans for tomorrow, plans for after the corona crisis, what's going to happen to my job, will I still have a job in 1 year, where will I be in 5 or 10 years, when will I finally get my enlightenment and my certification as a Zen teacher, stuff like that, might pop into your mind. And sometimes people tell me, how come that I have all these thoughts in my mind, which most of the day I don't have so many thoughts. Of course I'm thinking sometimes, but when I'm sitting in front of my computer, actually I wish I had some interesting thoughts coming up there that I could use for my work, but when I'm sitting there at the desk, I have no thoughts and an empty mind, and when I'm sitting on my cushion and try to meditate, then all these ideas come popping up and I can't let them go. And of course not all of them are actually good ideas, but also delusions and anger, greed, and all that stuff. Isn't Zazen supposed to liberate us from all that garbage? And now I'm sitting there and I find myself right in the midst of this mental garbage. The point is, it's not that although we are sitting Zazen, we are having these thoughts, but actually it's because we are doing Zazen that we realize all these thoughts that we have. Sawaki Roshi says somewhere it's like a flea that's biting you on the testicles, like in Japanese you use, well, that's what he say. Imagine there's a flea on your testicles and you're right in the midst of a dance with a beautiful woman, a geisha. You might not even realize the flea biting you at that moment. Now imagine the same thing happening during Zazen. You will immediately realize, and you might think this is the most important thing in the world. This flea is killing me. I need to do something about the flea. How come that this is happening during Zazen? Well, actually, without doing Zazen, you might not even have noticed. So it's not that because of Zazen, out of a sudden we have all these thoughts and memories and plans for tomorrow, but it's because of Zazen that we realize how much is happening in our mind without us realizing that normally. Normally we're just slaves of what is happening in our minds, but now in the Zen we can't do anything about it, so you realize what's happening there. And the basic attitude is to let it happen. Don't ignore it, let it happen, let it go, don't cling to it, don't try to cut it off, don't follow these thoughts either. Just let it happen as part of the whole scenery, just as there might be some insect moving over the floor while you're sitting. You don't have to ignore that insect, you see it moving and then it will disappear again. Birds might be chirping when you do the Zen. You don't try to stop these birds, you're not attached to the birds. They sing and at one point they will stop again. In the same way, you listen to these thoughts, you observe these thoughts as if they were birds or if they're cars that pass in front of the house. Let them pass. And there might be one car passing after the other, so what can you do about that? Let one car pass in front of the other. I've been using this metaphor a lot of times, but I will use it once more. Often during Zazen it feels as if you were watching a meadow. You're kind of walking over a meadow and you see there's lots of sheep there, sheep that before you didn't notice, and the sheep are all over the place and you're worried that they might eat all those vegetables and all those flowers that you have been growing. So you feel it's your job as the shepherd to build a fence around the sheep and make sure they don't get out of there. And when you build that fence, you all might notice it's not only white sheep but also black sheep. So you think, oh, I need to separate these and count them and make sure that they all stay in place. And once you start to do it, the sheep will become even more mischievous and they will jump over all those fences that you built, and even once you think you got them separated, the black ones and the white ones, they will mingle again. And you might get quite frustrated when you realize all these things that come up in my mind. I can't control them. So at one point the shepherd is close to exploding and might say, I'm gonna kill you all. I'm gonna kill all of these sheep and make a big barbecue party tonight. But the sheep won't be impressed by that. The shepherd can't catch the sheep. And he's making a hell there on the meadow. And well, if you look on it, or look at this, what's happening there, you calm down and look at it, you will realize that the one who's causing all the problems on the meadow is not this or that sheep, but it's the shepherd that you've been playing all the time. So one thing you can do during the Zen, if that happens to you, is you might discover that in the center of this meadow there's a big tree. Find that tree, lie down under the tree, look up into the branches and give the shepherd a break. So what is this tree? For example, that can be your breath. Maybe for most of your life you weren't even aware that you're breathing. Of course, intellectually you knew, I need oxygen to live. But most of the time we're not aware of our breath. that would be that tree. If you give the shepherd a break and let him rest under the tree, look up into the branches. That means you breathe out, you breathe in, and your mind is with the breath. All these other thoughts and emotions don't disappear instantly, but they kind of in the background maybe, but they don't disturb you that much anymore. You can even focus, if you are able to focus well enough on the breath, they almost completely fade out. Or what you could do in the metaphor would be to look into the distance, and you might see there's a range of mountains like the Rocky Mountains, and you look maybe at one peak only, or you look at the whole range. And of course also at that point you forget about the sheep. The sheep are still there, but what you see are the mountains. Those mountains would be your body. You can focus, for example, when you're sleepy, you can focus on the tip of the head or on the nose. If you want to relax, you focus on the so-called tanden. It's an area below the navel. Or you can focus on the feet, or you can watch, well, how are my hands doing? You can stay with the Hokkaido, the cosmic mudra. All of these are techniques to give the shepherd a break and focus the mind to, well, create some kind of samadhi state where thoughts and feelings are still there, but they don't bring you off balance. The problem with this is that in that kind of samadhi state, your mind is pretty, well, small, restricted. For example, if you watch the breath, you see the breath pretty clearly. You're focused on the breath, but everything else fades out. In the long run, I think during Zazen you should be open to everything that happens. So not only the breath, but the rest of the physical perceptions, the whole visual perceptions, whatever you hear, and also the thoughts. How can you do that without being the shepherd? Well, imagine you watch that meadow from the perspective of the sky. You see everything that's happening there. You see the sheep, but you don't try to control them anymore. You don't build any fences. You don't separate the white and the black. Or you could also say it's like you're watching planet Earth from the moon. And you watch planet Earth, but you don't have to arrange things on planet Earth. And there's a huge difference between trying to take charge of the meadow as the shepherd and just allowing the meadow to be and just watching it. But in the long run, I think there's still some pitfall there, because you might now become very attached to this position of the observer. I'm the neutral observer. I'm none of those sheep down there, and I'm not the shepherd either. I'm the moon. I'm not anything there on planet Earth. And that's another attachment. Before you were attached to the shepherd. At one point you might get attached to concentration on the breath or on the tanden, and now you're attached to this neutral observer. That's not part of the panorama that he's observing. At one point, I think you need to get back from the moon to planet Earth. You need to come back from the sky down onto the meadow without playing the shepherds and without allowing the sheep to play with you. How do you do that? Well, in the metaphor, it would mean that you become the meadow itself. You become the meadow itself. You allow, or you let the sheep trample on you. You let the sheep feed on you. You let the sheep shit on you. You let the sheep do whatever they want with you without controlling them. You just accept the whole scenery as it is. And sometimes you realize, wow, where have they gone? Where have the sheep gone? What was the problem? Why was I exploding only 5 minutes, 10 minutes ago? I was close to exploding and I still thought I needed to be the shepherd, and now things are calm. And there isn't even this attachment to the neutral observer anymore. You're there as the meadow. The sheep are still there, but they've also found calm. Or maybe sometimes they don't find calm. Maybe after 1 hour, the sheep are still trampling on you. That also happens. Let it happen. Let it happen. So, okay. So much about Zazen. Tomorrow, Japanese time, Sunday 6:40. We're gonna do it. The Sunday after that as well. If you want to, please be there. If you don't have the time, you can watch it on YouTube later. If you want to attend the Japanese study group, I will put at the end of the live stream a link to the Skype meeting room. We are studying the Fukan Zazengi. It's all in Japanese, of course. But everybody's invited. I hope we all fit into that virtual Skype space. Otherwise, I will also experiment maybe next week with Zoom. I haven't much experience with Zoom yet. That would be another possibility. Yes, you find, if you're interested in the study group, you find a link to my Japanese blog, and there you will find last week's study group, and you will also find the text of the Fukan Zazengi, or 4 different versions of Zazengi. The oldest one is a Chinese version on which Dogen Zenji based his versions, but actually there are 3 different versions by Dogen Zenji. An early version of the Fukan Zazengi, the later one, and then there's also the chapter in the Shobo Genzo, which is again a little different from the Fukan Zazengi. Okay, thank you for watching, and maybe see you tomorrow. Or some of you probably will watch this after April 12th, but probably there's gonna be a chance to join me during Zazen after April 12th as well. The next time after that would be April 19th. And once this crisis is over, we will probably be sitting back in the park, but well, you can join me in the park then if you're in Japan, in Osaka, or I will also be on YouTube in the future. I don't intend to quit YouTube completely, even when we're welcome to leave the house again. Okay, so much for today. Have a good time.